So the title today should be fairly self-explanatory. We're actually looking at used graphics cards specifically through the website eBay, and for me I'm looking at the US version of the site, so I know that'll differ for some people depending on where in the world you are, but I'm using eBay because it's readily available to everyone and it's a great resource if you are building a computer using used parts. So before we hop over to the charts to actually take a look at what I found were some of the better deals on eBay, let me explain my methodology a little bit. I'm using the GTX 960 2GB version as the complete baseline for all the comparisons. So when I went to figure out the performance percentages, and that is how well cards performed compared to the 960, I had to look all over for different benchmarks with various graphics cards comparing it to the 960. Now the reason I used one graphics card as the baseline was simply because it's really hard to find a good resource that compares all these different older cards together. Usually when you see reviews, you're comparing a modern graphics card to other modern graphics cards and not really these years old generations to each other. So the 960 was the baseline and everything I looked up was compared to that 960. So with that, let's move over to the charts and take a look at what the best used graphics card values are on the market. Okay, starting off with the rough price points of all these cards that I looked at, starting on the bottom end with the GTX 750 Ti. It looks like you can find these for around the $75 price point. A 660 will run you about $80. A 660 Ti will run you about $85 along with a 760. The GTX 960, which was the baseline, is running for about $110. The R9 280X is about $130. And by the way, I was going to also look at the R9 280, but what I found was they were about the same exact price point as the 280Xs, which seemed to be a little bit more available anyways on eBay. So I felt like since they're the same price point, there really was no purpose in looking at the 280, since the 280X was the same price point. You might as well just pick up the 280X. The R9 290 was about $170, and the last card I really looked at was the GTX 970, which is still running about $185 on eBay. Now, moving over to the most informative graph, or at least the graph with the most information on it, is the performance and price graph. Now, the blue bar is the percent performance of the 960 for each card, and then the white bar or the light gray bar there is the price percentage that you'll pay of the 960 for each card. So that is why the 960's percentages are both 100. The other thing to point out here is that because I used data from all over the internet, and I was looking at cards specifically compared to the 960, there are some things I do want to point out. First and foremost is the fact that the GTX 660, in most cases, will beat out a GTX 950 Ti. It's just the fact of the matter. So this graph is not 100% accurate. It is close to accurate in most cases, but it is not by any means an end-all be-all graph. So I do want to just throw that out there. It's not me trying to be lazy here. Again, it's just the fact that it's impossible to find, or nearly impossible anyways, to find a reliable benchmark that shows all of these cards compared to each other ran at the same time. So the data is not perfect by any means, and do take it with just a bit of a grain of salt. And of course, it is a good time to go ahead and plug that you should always do your own research. Don't just rely on YouTube or the internet. Also do your own research and come to your own conclusions. This is just a resource to help you along the way. So regardless, starting out, I found that the GTX 660 a lot of times was coming up with around 70% of the performance, actually 68% there, of the performance of the GTX 960, but you're paying more like 73% of the cost on eBay, so it's not a great deal. With the benchmarks I used, the 750 fared a little bit better, but again, those numbers especially I feel like are skewed. If you're able to get roughly the same price between the 750 Ti and the GTX 660, I recommend the 660 because it will beat out the GTX 750 Ti in most cases. However, on eBay right now, the 660 is a little bit more expensive than the 750 Ti, so it is something to consider there. Moving on up the ladder there, we have the GTX 660 Ti, and it is a better performing card than the 660 or the 750 Ti, getting you about 80% of the performance of the 960, but you're still only paying about 77% of the cost, making it a good deal. But for about the exact same cost, you can move over to the 760, which performs even better related to the 960, and pay about the same as the 660 Ti. So if you're in sort of this sub $100 range, then the best price to performance ratio you're going to find looks like the GTX 760. Moving on over to the 960, it is considerably more expensive right now than the GTX 760, so I can't recommend it over the 760. I feel like that price point is a big enough a difference. You can get, if you're building a used computer, you can get better components elsewhere with about the $25 you're going to save by going with the 760 over the 960, and that may give you better storage, more storage, may give you more system memory. All those things could be improved with $25, especially when we're working on a tight, low-budget PC. So I can't really recommend the 960 there, and for that matter, I definitely can't recommend the R9 280X because, again, you're just paying a premium for that extra 6% that you get over the 960, and the difference in the games just aren't going to be worth it. Sort of the same scenario here on the GTX 970. Again, you're paying a premium for the percentage gain that you're getting over the 960. However, it is worth pointing out that as you go up the ladder in used cards and on the used card market and even the brand new card market, you're getting a diminishing returns deal here. So for example, the 1080 Ti is a very expensive graphics card, but compared to the 1060, those extra frames you're getting from the 1080 Ti get more and more expensive the more of them you get. The same thing is true of the used card market. The R9 290 is a bit of a different story though as we climb the ladder here. It gave us 159% of the performance of the 960, but we're only paying 155% of the cost, meaning that even in relation to the 960, the R9 290 is a good value proposition as well as a really great performer. And lastly, moving over to our price percentage to performance percentage ratio, basically the lower the bar, the better the value is compared to the GTX 960. We see that the GTX 760 gave us the best value proposition, but again, that's not taking into account that the higher end cards are just typically not as good in the price to performance ratio anyways. Regardless, the raw numbers say the GTX 760 is the best value on the board. The 660 Ti comes in next, followed by the R9 290, and those are the top three cards that I would really choose from here. If you're going for the higher end of things, you want better graphics, and you're planning on pushing your system a little bit more, the R9 290 is definitely the way to go. And if you're really looking more in the budget side of things, it's really clear that the GTX 760 is one of the best sub $100 cards right now out there, at least on the used market. At that price point of just $75, you're getting a card that can still play modern AAA titles. Certainly not maxed out in most cases, but you also certainly get solid frame rates from that card, and it's definitely a value winner on the used market. So again, I can't stress enough just how important it is, especially when you're dealing with the used market, to do a lot of independent research if you're really trying to find the best value out there. But I am curious, if you guys are looking on the used market for graphics cards, which ones are you looking at? And if you're not using eBay, what sites are you going to, or what places are you going to find those used cards and those used deals? Let me know in the comments down below. And of course, if you like this content, give it a like, share, subscribe, and comment. All those things are very helpful to the channel. You can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. They're the same tag for your convenience. And as always, we'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.